A draw is fine for Magnus, he would win it. Knight c6, and we have the Italian. Bishop c5, pawn comes up to d3, knight f6, and we go bishop g5. It's as if the players know what they're going to play, ready with their moves. This is a very well-known popular line. In fact, Pragnananda played it against Caruana with the black pieces at their encounter in the World Cup. You want to go g5 as black, but first queen e7 makes sense. Bishop e6. This is also played before, and now I think Alireza wants to take some time. A sip of water is just a sign to yourself and your opponent that I want to think a bit before my move. A4 played, and Magnus castles, so he's still in his preparation here. Bishop goes to d5. Now this is a very interesting move. This has never been played before, and Magnus goes g5. Whoa, sacks here. Look at what's happening. Now firstly, if you would have moved your bishop away, you would have simply lost a pawn, right? So you had to take on g5. Once you take here, now if you take back bishop g5, this is quite an irritating pin, but it can be continued with king g7, and this position still remains complex. But Magnus is thinking, and he plays knight takes d5, and you will see that there is a pin here. So knight takes bishop is a very logical move. Queen takes bishop. This all is kind of forced. Now notice, if you were to play knight takes rook here, then knight takes c3, and black is the one in the driver's seat. So that's the reason why he takes on d5, takes on e6, and now f2 is hanging. So g3 is played, and we reach this position where black is for the time being piece up, but the knight is hanging and the queen is hanging. So you're going to recover your piece back. This is excellent play by Alireza. Firouzja, in all these complications, he's managed to get a good position against Magnus. He now takes on c6. Magnus takes back. Also remember, all these sacrifices on f2 don't really work because somehow the king escapes and there's a knight to protect. So taking back on c6 is the most sensible option for Magnus for the time being. Now, this position does look very enticing for black, because not only is f2 weak, he goes queen e2, but also there's a plan of going rook f5 to h5 to threaten mate on h2. And Magnus is going for the rook. He plays rook f5. But this all can be stopped with one good move. Exactly, Alireza finds it. Excellent move, king h1. Because what are you doing now is you're going to push your pawn to f3. So when the rook goes here, the queen will defend it. Rook comes in to f8 and f3 played. So overall, we will see that there are equal number of pawns, but white structure is excellent. No doubled pawns. While black structure has doubled pawns here, isolated pawns. So black is aiming for more dynamic things here. Rook g5 played here by Magnus, trying to attack here. Now the knight can jump to e4. It looks like a great move. You can also trade your queen with queen g2. Let's see what Alireza goes for. Look at Magnus's focus there. He knows that to beat Alireza is never easy. He has given him a lot of respect, not now, but since many years. He felt that he was his natural successor. Of course, Alireza has shown his talent and skill on several occasions, but has not been able to progress at that rapid pace as everyone imagined. And even at the recent candidates where he was playing, it was Gukesh who managed to win the title. However, that being said, when it comes to speed chess, Alireza is clearly one of the best. We saw him recently in an online tournament where he managed to outwit Magnus Carlsen, and over here as well, he is looking in good shape. For the time being, he's thinking he has more time on the clock than Magnus, and he's actually deciding between knight e4, attacking the rook, defending here, and queen g2, which is also a very nice move, because if the queens are traded, this is now a one-sided position. Black really doesn't have much to play for. White can press endlessly, and queen g2 has been played by Alireza. Magnus is so clear about these things. He quickly does not even think even 1 second about the queen trade, comes back, attacks the pawn on d3, rook comes in. Now you cannot go pawn grabbing because knight e4, the queen is attacked and the rook is hanging. So you have to go for something else. And for Magnus to find a way to create play is not so simple. You can go, he goes h5. He wants to play h4 and he wants to use his pieces which are sort of angling down the white king. Now can Alireza play h4 on his own? Does not seem very good because the g3 pawn becomes very weak. So better is not to touch it and actually wait for black to play h4 so that you can respond back with g4. That seems like the best way to continue. And what is white going to do now is the question, because even for white to create some kind of a pawn break is not easy. b5 is not really good, it kind of undoubles the pawns. Knight b3 is played. So the knight is well positioned. It wants to go to a5 and attack c6. So fantastic idea there by Alireza, taking on the risk of leaving, of putting his knight a little bit on the sidelines, because he could have put it in the center as well on e4. But he's going more ambitious. He wants to win the c6 pawn here. Now Magnus can push his pawn to h4 and really soften up the king. Magnus has 4 minutes 42 seconds, Alireza has 6 minutes 19 seconds, so the time difference has come down. But a key moment of the game, you can also try and play bishop b6, somehow trying to dominate the knight from coming forward. I think this is the moment where Magnus is taking most of his time, because he knows that h4 is not a move that you play without responsibility, because g4 and then everything is shut down. He does not have the pawn break anymore. The other idea which you can tinker with is d5, although it weakens the e5 pawn and it's overall weakening the structure after knight a5. It seems like white has an excellent position. So right now, at least to knight a5, you have the move c5 in hand. That's the reason why Magnus has to make a very, very considered, calm choice here. h4 played, and I don't think Alireza will take more than a few seconds to decide to go g4. Yes, he instantly plays it. Queen goes back to h7. Maybe with some ideas of h3 if needed. White can himself play h3, because you know, if the pawn comes to h3, it becomes a dangerous attacker. Imagine at some point the queen goes away, the pawn on h3 can create mating nets. So you may want to play your pawn to h3 as white and keep the black pawn at bay. But on the other hand, we all know how ambitious Firouzja is, and he will most likely play his knight to a5, trying to attack the c6 pawn. Because if he doesn't see anything happening on the king side, why should he spend time on it? Firouzja also has another few ideas that he can go for. Maybe d4 is not such a silly move. He goes queen e2. He brings his queen to the center of the board, and I think from here he's just basically saying my queen is defending. f3, g2, d3, everything. h3, Magnus brings his pawn in. These are some of the moves that you play on your intuition. You just know that in future some line, let's say after d4, queen takes pawn, the queen is far away and my queen will enter and try to threaten checkmate. These are some of the things that are in your mind. You don't calculate them, you just push your pawn there on h3. Now will Firouzja go for knight a5 and try to put pressure here? No, he goes d4. He's actually going after this bishop here on a7. So let's say if e takes d4, maybe he wants to take here. But then you have to be very careful about the queen coming in. We spoke about this. We spoke about the h3 pawn. So will Magnus take on d4 or will he not? Because also don't forget, if you take on d4, you have to calculate queen takes pawn check. King has to move to the side, and actually there's nothing much happening there. So maybe this is completely fine for Magnus. Also, you have to be careful about your bishop getting blocked in. So lot to calculate for Magnus. Under 3 minutes he has, actually coming down to 2 minutes, while Firouzja has 5 minutes on the clock. So this is really high quality chess by Alireza. E takes d4, c takes d4. He doesn't even get tempted to take e6, tempted to take a6. Magnus now pushes his pawn to e5, and this is a good move, because with this he's making sure that his bishop does not get trapped there on a7. If you take back here, rook takes e5 is just exactly what black wants, with his rook coming in, queen coming in, this pawn here, the bishop controlling the g1 square. White king looks in trouble. So Firouzja now has to decide how is he going to deal with this e5 move. Not so easy to decide what to do, because this is such a powerful move, threatening to take. Maybe there is one more idea, to move your knight to a5, so that when bishop takes d4 you can take on c6. He goes knight a5. Firouzja with 4 minutes 15 seconds, Magnus takes on d4, knight takes c6 has been played. So now the knight is threatening to take here, but also very importantly, if the a6 pawn falls, then the a pawn is a big passer. It's an very, very important moment in the game. What is Magnus going to do with his position here? He goes queen f7, and it's the best move in the position here. I like how Magnus, when he drops the pieces, he just adjusts everything. Even though he has 1 minute 34 seconds, he keeps his calm. We are on move 29. After move 40, we have 1 second increment per move. Now, the knight can actually take on d4. That is very logical. It is possible to do that. But maybe Alireza has some different thoughts in his mind. He thinks he can take on a6 perhaps. Maybe not, because queen a2, and all of a sudden there's no one to prevent the mate. You see how useful the h3 pawn is. This is very, very cool what what Magnus has managed to do with queen f7. He is keeping an eye on this rook g4 tactics, because look, after something that is played, rook g4, fg4, there's queen d5, which is a mate thanks to this bishop. White can take on d4. It is possible to play this way. But Firouzja again very ambitious. He sees that Magnus has 1 minute 30 seconds and plays a move that is so non-committal, rook c1, and he asks Magnus, now what are you going to do next? This is what Firouzja does. That is why he's so dangerous. He wants to beat Magnus. It's not like he wants to hold him in any way. He just wants to go all out and smash him. And here rook g6 played. Magnus is trying to go rook f6 and put super pressure on the f3 pawn. Is it now safe to take this? Maybe, because now queen a2 is met with queen c4 check. Oh, that's the reason why it put his rook on c1. Very interesting. Will Alireza be tempted to take the pawn? Because also it's a dangerous pawn, but it's such a key pawn. Because once you win it, all endgames generally should be winning for you. You can see Alireza calmly calculating there. Magnus has 1 minute 9 seconds. Alireza has roughly 2 minutes on the clock. I guess he will go for it. He will go for it. That's how he is built. That's the kind of person he is. Most of the people against Magnus would take the bishop and just try to kind of play the game normally. But Alireza is calculating. He's also calculating here. Rook takes g4. Because, oh, by the way, if you take here, there is check. But here there is a classy move, knight e7 check. And after this, the d5 square is controlled. If you take, g4 is hanging and white wins. So another trap here set by Alireza could happen if he takes the pawn on a6. He's calculating all these nuances. Really, this is what is going through the minds of these top players. So much to look at, but you know what Alireza is doing badly here is the fact that he is just losing all his time advantage. He had a big one, but now after this moment, he might get a good position, but time is also such a crucial factor. And sometimes I do feel that Alireza does not give enough respect to the clock. He is often thinking a bit too much, and here perhaps there's no killer blow as such. And he might even run lower on the clock than Magnus. Finally goes and chops it with 1 minute 3 seconds on the clock. Magnus goes rook f6. And now it's time to come back with your queen. f3 is hanging. Queen e2 makes sense because then you can go into an endgame. But here's the key point. Queen e2, rook f3, and there's this beautiful check here. If king h8, knight g6 check, and then you win this, and the knight comes to, wherever you go, king h7, knight comes to f5, and white is actually in a great position. So queen e2 played here, and Magnus takes. Oh, but Alireza has touched the rook. Otherwise, knight e7 would have been such a good move there. He takes on d4, pawn takes, and now important to get your king out from this mating net. It's very, very critical. Alireza down to 31 seconds. Magnus has 1 minute, 1 second. The way in which Magnus has recovered his time is just phenomenal. Alireza blunders with rook a1. Now d3, a5, d2, a6, rook e3. With the idea of rook e1 is completely winning for Magnus. Can he find this winning sequence? d3 is the winning move. Will Magnus play it? No, he goes rook b3. And Alireza is back in the game now. He can start pushing his a pawn. He pushes a5. Rook takes b4, a6. Rook has to come back. a7 and rook a8. But Magnus is kind of happy here because he knows he might not lose this position. And a draw is enough for him in this Armageddon. His central 3 pawns are pretty good. With his king coming in, this should be enough. Also, Magnus has 1 point lead in this tournament. So, in case if he manages to hold this, look at Alireza's time. He has just 1 second on the clock. And Magnus calms down here. He knows that a few good moves and he will win this. King g6, king c3, d5. Rook comes back. He should have taken on d5 to draw the game. But here, Magnus is winning. Alireza resigns.